David and Cooper are both 33 years old, live in the same city, and both bring home $90,000 a year. Somehow, between skip takeout orders, canceled memberships, and years of quietly convincing themselves that the generic brand cereal really is just as good, each of them has managed to sock away $80,000 in savings. On paper, these two guys are financial twins. In every other way, they couldn't be less alike. My name is Jeff Whitfield, and welcome to my Money Mindset. I'm here to help you improve your mindset around money. Back to David, he is a planner. He wants to know what next year looks like, and the year after that. What he's after is permanence, a garage to fill with tools he probably won't master, a yard he'll eventually obsess over, and a place nobody can tell him how to decorate. Cooper is wired the opposite way. Flexibility is what matters to him. He likes not knowing exactly where he'll land, and the thought of being tied to one address for the next 3 decades genuinely unsettles him. That single difference in temperament eventually splits their financial paths in two. David goes out and buys a house. Cooper stays a renter. Over the next 20 years, we're going to track both of their journeys. Every mortgage bill, every rent hike, every surprise repair, and every dollar Cooper redirects into the market instead of a down payment. Two guys, same paycheck, same starting balance, two completely different roads. Let's see where each one leads. Right now, both of them are renting apartments across town from each other. David spends months hunting, scrolling listings, touring house after house, before he lands on the one. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a modest backyard, and a garage roomy enough for workout gear. He'll almost certainly abandon by spring. He pulls the trigger. The house runs $340,000. He puts down $68,000, a clean 20%, leaving a mortgage of $272,000. Of course, the down payment is only part of the bill. Closing costs, lender fees, title work, inspections, prepaid taxes, and something like 40 pages of paperwork he signs without fully reading stand between him and the keys. Closing costs generally land somewhere between 2 and 5% of the sale price, which on this house puts the range at roughly $6,800 to $17,000. Let's say David lands right in the middle and pays $12,000 to close. Add that to his down payment, and he spent every last cent of his $80,000 before he's even unpacked a box. His loan is a standard 30-year fixed mortgage at 6.5%, which puts his monthly principal and interest at roughly $1,720. And that's before the rest of homeownership shows up, about $335 a month in property taxes, $145 in insurance, and another $283 set aside for maintenance, a rough 1% of the home's value per year. Add it all up, and David's real monthly cost of owning this house lands around $2,483. Cooper's monthly numbers tell a different story entirely. He's renting a similar 3-bedroom nearby for $1,950 a month. No taxes, no insurance premium, and if a pipe bursts, that's a call to the landlord, not a call to a contractor. That gap leaves Cooper with an extra $533 sitting in his account every month. There's a moment where that money starts to look like a plane ticket somewhere warm. Instead, Cooper does something less fun and more useful. He takes the $80,000 he never spent on a house and drops it into a broad index fund, and every month after that, the $533 he's not spending on ownership costs follows it in. Early on, Cooper's approach looks like the clear winner. Similar house, lower monthly cost, and his money is out there working for him instead of sitting still. Somebody always jumps in here to say Cooper is just lighting rent money on fire while David quietly builds equity. That's technically not wrong, but it's incomplete. In these first years, David's equity crawls forward at a painfully slow pace. Break down his very first payment. $1,473 goes to interest, $335 to taxes, $145 to insurance, $283 to maintenance. Out of a $2,483 monthly outlay, only about $247 actually chips away at what he owes. The rest is simply the price of the roof over his head. Cooper's $1,950 in rent builds him nothing in equity. That part's true. But pretending mortgage interest, taxes, insurance, and roof repairs all count as investing is its own kind of dishonest math. Jump ahead 3 years. David has now made 36 payments and learned the first real lesson of owning a house. Every odd creak or drip now comes with a price tag attached. One Saturday, the water heater dies. He watches a video called "Anyone Can Fix This in 20 Minutes," spends 4 hours failing to fix it himself, and finally calls in a professional. The bill comes to a few $100s. Annoying, but exactly the kind of thing his maintenance fund exists for. 3 years in, David's loan balance has dropped from $272,000 down to about $262,200, just under $10,000 of actual principal paid off. Assume the house has appreciated somewhere between 3 and 4% annually, and it's now worth somewhere in the range of $371,500 to $382,500. Subtract what he still owes, and David is sitting on roughly $109,000 to $120,000 in equity. That's genuine wealth, on paper at least. Cooper, over that same stretch, has handed his landlord about $70,200 in rent. But his original $80,000 never stopped compounding. At 10% a year, it's grown to somewhere around $106,500 on its own. Factor in everything he's added monthly plus the growth on those contributions, and his total portfolio now sits around $128,700. 3 years in, then it's remarkably even. David has real equity. Cooper has a real portfolio. David gets to repaint his kitchen any color he wants. Cooper could pack up and be gone in 30 days. From here, though, the numbers on both sides start to shift. David's mortgage payment itself never moves, but his total cost of owning the place does, because rising home values drag his property taxes up with them. Insurance premiums creep, and an aging house starts asking for pressure repairs. Cooper's cost of living, meanwhile, is entirely tied to one number that keeps climbing: rent. What started at $1,950 ticks upward every year. His landlord, it turns out, understands compounding just fine when it benefits him. As rent rises roughly 3% annually, that $533 cushion Cooper once had starts shrinking. Time from this point forward is quietly working in David's favor. His cost is locked while Cooper's keeps rising. But Cooper's still holding one card David isn't: opportunity cost. That original $80,000 has been parked in the market this whole time, and at 10% annually, it's positioned to multiply significantly over the next 2 decades, and that's before adding another dollar of new contributions. This isn't a knock on David's choice. His $80,000 went into a house that's also appreciating and building equity of its own. But it's only an honest comparison if we acknowledge that money could have gone somewhere else and track what that somewhere else would have looked like. Fast forward to year 10. David is now 43. His house, still climbing at 3 to 4% a year, is worth somewhere between roughly $457,000 and $503,000. His loan balance has fallen to about $230,300, leaving him with equity somewhere between $226,700 and $272,700. He's now the guy who walks through his own house like he owns half of it, because, more or less, he does. Along the way, he's also spent real money keeping the place standing, some of which added value, some of which just kept entropy at bay. Cooper hasn't slowed down either. His original $80,000, still compounding at 10%, is now worth roughly $207,500 by itself. Layer on everything he's contributed monthly, a number that started at $533 and has been quietly shrinking as his rent climbs, and his total portfolio now sits around $286,000. So at the 10-year mark, Cooper's still ahead on paper. But his rent isn't $1,950 anymore. A decade of 3% annual bumps has pushed it up near $2,620 a month. David's mortgage payment, meanwhile, hasn't budged from about $1,720. Now skip ahead to year 20. Both men are 53. David's home, still appreciating at 3 to 4%, is now worth somewhere between roughly $614,000 and $745,000. His remaining loan balance has shrunk to about $150,500, which puts his equity somewhere between $463,500 and $594,500. Cooper's portfolio has had 2 decades to compound. That original $80,000 alone is now worth roughly $538,200. Tack on every monthly contribution he ever made, plus what all of it earned along the way, and his total balance lands around $726,000. By the numbers, Cooper comes out ahead after 20 years, but the 2 piles of wealth don't behave the same way. Cooper's money is liquid. He can access it whenever he needs it. David can't exactly sell off a corner of his living room to raise cash. And Cooper's one recurring cost never goes away. After 20 years of 3% annual increases, his original $1,950 rent has climbed to around $3,520 a month, with no end date attached. David, meanwhile, has just 10 years left before his mortgage disappears entirely. Here's the catch on Cooper's side, though. None of it works without follow-through. Every single month for 2 decades, whether the market's up, down 30%, or the news is convinced, the whole system is collapsing again. He has to actually make the transfer. The math assumes discipline that most people don't sustain. In real life, that monthly investment often quietly turns into a new car, a couple of trips, a slightly nicer lifestyle, and a decade later, the portfolio that looks so good on a spreadsheet somehow never actually got funded. A mortgage doesn't give you that choice every month, which is sort of the point. David isn't deciding whether he feels like building equity today. The bank already decided that for him the day he signed, and that built-in structure matters more than people give it credit for. Buying isn't without its own weak points, though. Timing is the first one. Sell too early, say at year 3, and closing costs on the way in, selling costs on the way out, and years of interest-heavy payments can erase most of the advantage. Buying needs time to pay off. Mobility is the second issue. Picture both of them getting a great job offer out of state a few years in. Cooper's answer is simple. Give notice, pack, go. David's answer involves a decision tree. Sell the house and deal with agent fees and finding a buyer, or become a long-distance landlord juggling a mortgage in one city and rent in another, hoping a tenant covers the gap. Any shortfall lands squarely on David cutting into what he has left to save. Then there's concentration. Cooper's money is spread across thousands of companies. David's is tied up in one house, on one block, in one part of one city. If that neighborhood booms, great for David. If it struggles, he can't just sell off the upstairs bathroom to rebalance. And finally, access. If Cooper suddenly needs $18,000, he sells some shares. If David needs that same $18,000, his options are a refinance, a loan against his equity, or selling the house outright. Equity is real wealth. It's just not especially liquid wealth. So who actually wins? Buying or renting? Honestly, it depends. Buying tends to pay off when you're staying put. 7 to 10 years or longer gives those upfront costs time to fade into the background. Principal keeps chipping away, and a locked-in payment becomes more valuable every year rents keep rising. It also works better when home prices make sense relative to rent. A quick gut check is the price-to-rent ratio. Divide the home's price by a year's worth of comparable rent. Here, $340,000 divided by $23,400 comes out to about 14.5. Once that number climbs well past 19, renting typically starts looking like the smarter bet. Though it's only a starting point, not the whole picture. Rates, taxes, insurance, and expected returns still matter. Renting tends to win when prices are stretched relative to rent, when staying flexible actually matters to you, and, critically, when the renter genuinely reinvests what they save, and none of this has to be all or nothing. Owning a home doesn't require you to stop investing entirely. Personal finance rarely comes down to one correct strategy. It comes down to understanding what you're trading away. David gave up liquidity and mobility in exchange for stability, leverage, and control over where he lives. Cooper gave up permanence in exchange for flexibility, access to his money, and a bigger footprint in the market. Neither trade was automatically the smart one. Neither was automatically the dumb one either. It really comes down to 2 questions. First, how long will you actually stay put? Sell a home too soon and the transaction costs eat you alive. Second, if you rent, will you genuinely invest what you save? Because if that money quietly disappears into lifestyle spending instead, the whole advantage of renting evaporates with it. So no, renting isn't inherently wasting money any more than owning is automatically building wealth. Renters pay rent, owners pay interest, taxes, insurance, upkeep, and closing costs. Both groups are paying for a place to live. The bill just gets itemized differently. Homeownership absolutely can build serious wealth over time, but it's also an illiquid, concentrated asset with a roof that occasionally sends you a bill for $11,500. There's no automatic winner here. David needed enough time in the house for buying to pay off. Cooper needed enough discipline for renting to pay off. 20 years later, what separated them wasn't really the decision to buy or rent at all. It was what each of them actually did after making it. Subscribe to my money mindset for more breakdowns like this one, the logic behind the financial decisions we all make. Let me know in the comments. Are you buying, renting, or holding out for rates and home prices to drop at the same time? If it's the second one, I respect the optimism. See you in the next one.